Okay, here we are, Kinesiology 230. This is Chapter 7, Nutritional Concepts and Strategy. This is presentation number 2. We're talking about energy. And within this, the book lists energy. It's measured in kilocalories. Oftentimes you just see like calories, but it's the proper way to write this out would be kcalories, because a kilocalorie equates to the heat required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. And the generalized term for this is just a calorie, but just realize there'll be a test question on this and a quiz question regarding the specificity of 1 degree centigrade temperature increase for 1 kilogram of water. So 3 factors that make up energy requirements of adults, and this is the resting metabolic rate, the RMR, their physical activity, and the thermic effect of food. Now, each of these can be affected by a number of things: age, genetics, body size, body composition, environmental concerns like the ambient temperature, training conditions, non-training and physical activities, and caloric intake. So there's a number of things that can kind of play into each one of these. And excuse me, the resting metabolic rate itself, and the best way I can describe this is if you were lying in a like a recliner, semi-reclined position, eyes open, awake, not watching TV or reading or anything, but just awake with eyes open, that would the calories required to sustain just you at that point would be the resting metabolic rate, RMR. And that contributes to about 60 to 75% of our caloric needs just in our body, just to sustain life. And it's just a measure of just being alive. I can't stress that enough. What happens though is as soon as you get up out of that semi-reclined position, sit up and put your feet on the floor, that is over and above RMR. So RMR itself, there's things that factor into this, and the book lists several of them. So RMR can be increased by gaining lean body tissue. Just think of it right in terms of if I have more lean muscle mass, that requires more circulatory, more caloric, as well as just an uptick in all the regulatory components that keep my body running. Other things that can affect RMR include age, because as we're younger, we're growing, so we have a higher caloric requirement. If we're growing, so we're going to have a higher caloric requirement. Body temperature, whether it's warm or cold, menstrual cycle, and hyper or hypothyroidism will affect RMR. What they note is factors that decrease RMR include low caloric intake, loss of lean tissue, and hypothyroidism versus hyperthyroidism for increasing RMRs. Just realize there are 2 sides of that coin. The factors that make up energy requirements for adults, right, in terms of physical activity, you have this kind of variable component to the requirements in terms of energy. RMR is pretty straightforward. It's based upon just us, our body mass, and everything we just saw in the previous slide. But when we get into weightlifting, swimming, biking, and running, well, that intensity is going to determine how many calories we actually need to sustain that activity and sustain our body. If we're working out in extreme heat or cold, that will increase the energy expenditure. So there's a couple different things that are that play into this and make it pretty variable, right, in terms of how many calories we actually need. And the third part is the thermic effect of food. To increase energy expenditure above RMR, above RMR after we eat a meal would be the thermic effect of food. So you eat food and your body has to process that food, so there's a thermic effect. So the total energy requirement to do that is about 7 to 10% of total requirements. But I will point this out too, that protein has the highest thermic effect of macronutrients, and the intake that is appropriately high in protein, such as we mentioned earlier in terms of grams per pound of body weight, will lead to a higher thermic effect within a given percent of training. Meaning, you need protein to be broken down into branched chain amino acids to be able to be processed and create energy. Actually requires energy, right? So there's a net energy requirement just to break down protein. And I know you see that on a test question somewhere. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So the book offers table 7.2, the one on top here, and then 7.3 to assist in calculating daily caloric needs based on resting energy expenditure. And you can go through and do the math on some of these if you so choose. If we looked at estimated daily caloric needs of males and females by activity level, we can see male, male, female, female. And if we look at activity level, and we kind of evaluate here what we're looking at, light, moderate, or heavy in terms of activity level, we know that the caloric need for performing these activities per kilogram, right? So what we have is per calorie per pound and a calorie per kilogram. You can calculate that out based upon these recommendations, which is great, but again, there's a lot of variability that goes into some of the activities that we talk about, whether you're on a rowing machine, a step mill, you're running outside, or you're pulling stumps out of your backyard, whatever it may be. There are different activities that have different energy requirements, and they provide these loose guidelines, which I think are great, but you got to realize that it's a little more nuanced than that. Estimated caloric needs based on REE, which is resting energy expenditure, and activity level. So you look at this, you can kind of fit into any number of categories. Let's say you're male and you're 20 years old. Well, this would be the calculation you would use to determine your estimated daily caloric needs. And I would tell you that this is great, but depending upon how the person is made will also matter. If the person has more lean muscle mass, meaning they have a lower body fat percentage, that's going to have an effect on the person. They could weigh 100 kilograms, 220 pounds, but if they're 100 kilograms and their body fat percent is 7%, they got a ton of lean muscle mass and very little weight that's going along for the ride. Conversely, if somebody is 20% body fat, that's going to change the caloric needs. So I would just point out that even though body mass is a key indicator, it's how the mass is configured in a two-compartment model that also matters. That's not really talked about in the book too much, but I just want to point that out. Moving on to the next presentation.